This is Corey.
Hi, thanks for taking some time to chat with me.
Sure, absolutely.
I guess I want to begin with talking about your recent single, Worthy, which features Jeff Loomis. How would you say playing with Disciples of Verity compares to your past bands and projects?
It's just a lot different in a lot of ways, I guess, because the specifics of the style of this band are kind of all different for everybody that's involved. So it makes it kind of a little bit more interesting because everybody's sort of new to it in different ways, like not new to obviously playing metal and stuff like that, but just the different sort of kinds of things that go into the songs are just new to everybody. Like obviously for Glover coming out of Living Color, it's way different because it's heavy and there's a lot of it's just more metal in general. He came basically out of a melodic hard rock sort of background. For me, I came out of a much thrashier sort of like thrashier band, like melodic thrash and stuff like that. So a lot of this is a lot more relaxed and slowed down. It's more groovy. It's still heavy, but it's just in a different way. And George and then the bass player and the two guitar players, they all kind of came from a little bit of different background as well, as far as like kind of hardcore background and stuff like that. So you put all these people together, kind of like it's a little bit strange, but it's fun because everybody's like, interested and everybody works hard, so it makes it easy, to kind of, make things happen and get into it. So, but it's a little awkward sometimes. You're just trying to figure out how you're supposed to fit into things and like, for me, it was kind of weird trying to just like not overplay and, not make things sound like my other band in certain ways. You know what I mean? Just kind of come at it from a different mental standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine it kind of makes things exciting and kind of fresh when you're playing a different style or, playing with other musicians.
Yeah, it's fresh in that it just brings on a different mental outlook. You get to do something a little bit different than you've done before. It's always good. It's good to kind of challenge yourself from a different angle.
Awesome. Do you have a fond musical memory from growing up, whether it be a concert or listening to records with friends?
I mean, I have a lot of fond memories. I guess one of my fondest, my mother's actually a musician, and I remember buying the Ozzy Osbourne, Randy Rhoads tribute record and bringing it home. And my mom, I woke up one morning, it was like a Saturday morning, my mom was actually playing it like super loud. Like Saturday morning was the time, like she cleaned the house, like a lot of moms do, that. And she was like blasting it because she liked the organs and stuff. She liked the dramatic nature of the music. And I wake up, thinking to myself, like, is my mom really blasting Ozzy Osbourne right now? So,
That's pretty awesome.
It was pretty cool moment. It was a pretty cool moment.
Well, since you've been in the industry for a while, what are your hopes for the music industry? Is there something you would like to see change or continue?
I definitely would like to see a lot of things change. I feel like there is a real absence of true creativity and greatness in this style of music anymore. People are too afraid, so they just kind of do, whatever they think is kind of the status quo. There's a lot of bands that I feel are very mediocre, but it's in the absence of greatness, mediocre is greatness to a lot of people because they don't know any better. I think that's sad. I think that there was a time at which I guess the general motivation for playing this style of music was more pure, I guess you could say. It was like based off of, not just creative ideas, but people just did it because they wanted to play heavy music. They were motivated by rebellion or anger, whatever it was. But I think that their motivation was just a little bit more pure. Now it's kind of like you have all these sort of like middle of the road bands where it's like, oh, it doesn't suck completely, but it's really not anything that you're going to write home about. And then you have a lot of bands that just, they just want to go out there and write music for people that just beat each other up to, like I feel like that's really fucking stupid.
Yeah.
It's not something I would ever want to do or be a part of. And I see it a lot, and I feel like that's really one of the major reasons that there aren't as many, there aren't any really like great bands anymore, because people have just sort of taken, anyway, like it's kind of a cumulative action where like record labels only want in on a going thing, so it makes bands more afraid to do anything original. They want to do whatever they think is safest that will sell. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a thing too. You want to have these great bands, you want to see great bands, you want to have great music, but you're cutting off any way for them to do that, because it's like any of those bands that come forward, it's almost impossible for other people to really hear them, because they're never going to get to, you know what I mean? Like labels are not going to pick them up. They don't want to believe in a band and invest in the band. They want they want to pick up on a band. It's got great social media numbers. They're doing this, and that. They want in on an ongoing thing, something that's already happening, instead of developing a band, which was the process, which is how you got great bands. They found bands that had a certain talent level and a certain energy, or whatever you want to call it, and then develop them. But I totally understand why labels don't want to take that risk, but at the same time, they're like killing the music industry. There's also a lot of these guys around, and I used to work with one of them, who have tremendous amounts of money, and they just feel like they can buy their way forward, or they can buy bands way forward, like buying on the tours and just spending tons of money on on gear and all kinds of things, which is, in a certain perspective, it's great to have money and to be able to do those things, but certain things just have to happen organically. That's the way they're going to happen. And it's also, especially in the world of metal and heavy music, it's a very small circle of people who are booking bands, managing bands, and, throwing shows and doing tours. Like, all those people know each other for a long time. And when they start catching a whiff of these guys that are, just spending all this money, that's all they're going to do. They're just going to take your money, but it's not going to really change anything. It just, it just makes you look like a person who thinks that they could buy the thing, instead of establishing some personal relationships and putting in the time and effort, to create a fan base and learn something about being on the road and whatever. It's I just feel like there's a lot of things going on in all parts of the industry that have robbed it of its purity in a lot of ways, and it's hard to get back to that. I think that there's a group of people who have been in this industry a very long time, who have the patience and the necessary resources to kind of drive these money guys out and make the music industry more of a boutique industry like it started. And I think when and if that happens, you'll have a lot more, quality bands and quality acts in general. It'll stifle some of this mediocrity and hopefully create some great music, because I think it's a sad state of affairs that we're in right now. See, like, I feel like we're in a position to do something different and to create some great music, because none of us is relying on this to create a future for ourselves. And that's a point of freedom that I feel now, where I definitely didn't feel, and God forbid, like everything was hinged on everything else. Like my whole life was sort of determined by what that band was going to do. This is kind of a different situation where I get to do things that I enjoy. I get to, play with guys that, it's like their life is not dependent on the success of this band. And that gives you a freedom to write music however you feel you want to write it, and I feel like a lot of people aren't in that position, and that's, a big part of why, it's like people see bands like Five Finger Death Punch being successful, so they just go out and write a watered-down Five Finger Death Punch album, because that's the safe way to go. You know what I mean? It's it's just a terrible situation, I think, all the way around. Like, some things need to change, but it's not going to happen. I can't see where it's going to happen immediately, of course, but I think that just like anything else, over the course of time, this shit will end just like any other cheesy cycle of things ends. You know what I mean? Eventually everything gets oversaturated. Like, grunge got kind of oversaturated down, so you went from like Screaming Trees and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and Nirvana and whatever, and then it got way dumbed down to like Puddle of Mud, you know? And then that was like the end of the cycle, like those dudes kind of like killed it. They're like, all right, we had a good thing, but these guys came in and they just fucked it up for everybody and destroyed, sort of that cycle of music. Or, the new metal, what they called, new metal. So you had like Korn, you had like Deftones, you had these bands that were coming out of like Montana, like those kind of bands that were coming through an original sound. And eventually, you get to bands like Trapped. And you're like, oh, those dudes killed it.
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's some nostalgia going on for, good rock music. What are you currently rocking out to?
I'm going to tell you that as far as my musical thing, I'm all over the place, like, every day. Like, I'll start off today listening to, like, I don't know, like Lenny Kravitz, and then I'll get into, like, some Yellow Machine Gun from Japan, and then I'll jump over to, like, some old school hip-hop, like old Redman, and then I'll jump on some Crowbar or COC. I'm a big COC fan, like, in Crowbar. I love Crowbar a lot. So I'm literally all over the place. And now, like, I'll jump into some Sinatra or something. I'm literally all over the map every single day. I listen to, like, all different kinds of stuff all throughout the day, just depending on my mood at the time.
Yeah, but, kind of the same way, eclectic taste, depending on, how the day's going.
I think that you kind of have to be, because I see people that are kind of like, they listen to death metal like all day, every day, day and night, and then they kind of get aggravated with people that aren't like them in that respect. Like, that you aren't, like, just listening to this all the time and, like, everything else is gay and this. And I feel like if you're a musician, you really love music in general, then there's no way that you can only like one kind of music all the time.
Yeah.
You don't really like music. You just like that. That's it. You know what I mean? But I feel like that would be a pretty boring individual to be around all the time. Like, that's corny.
I agree. I call those, like, music snobs. They think only one style is, good or, the right music to listen to.
I don't even think that that's being a snob. I just think that they're too ignorant to know any better. That's not snobbery. You're just stupid. You're oblivious to what is going on out, in the rest of the world if you think like that. Like, your worldview must be so freaking tiny. Like, that's all your mind can handle. Like, that's not snobbery. You're just too ignorant to know you're stupid. Yeah.
Right. And, well, before we wrap up, is there anything else you can tell us about your upcoming full-length album, Pragmatic Sanction?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I could tell you, but I mean, I guess the main thing I could tell you is that we had a lot of good friends, guests on this album that a lot of people know. Morgan Rose from Seven Dust, Phil Demo from Machine Head, obviously Jeff Loomis, and just the general vibe of everything. There's so many different textures and levels. There's a lot of really heavy stuff. There's a lot of really melodic stuff. There's a lot of really dark stuff. There's some emotional stuff on there because, like I said, just the amalgamation of the people involved creates a lot of different moods. So I think that there's a lot of people who will be very surprised once they hear the whole album. Like, there's so much going on and so many, I don't want to say it's like so many different directions where it's like confusing, but it's a lot of things that are similar in nature in that there's a lot of things that are grooving and heavy and melodic, but they're just presented in several different ways. which I feel like is a lot more dynamic and people won't really be expecting, just like, just in general, but definitely just having like Glover's sort of vocal style against heavy music. Like there's no screaming on the record at all. And I see a lot of people where they're just going to want to be like, oh, there's no screaming on it. But like when metal was first created, no one was screaming on albums. You actually had to be able to sing. You actually, Rob Halford didn't scream. Like it wasn't on the Judas Priest records like, like in some ununderstandable. Like I don't have a problem with any of it. I feel like certain things intensify music vocally when there's growling or screaming, or it's meant to have a reason, but it's like another one of those things that it just got dumbed down over a period of time, and people who had no talent for to sing or whatever just started doing that just because they were capable of that. And then on top of that, there's people that are great screamers and growlers and things like that. Like they have a certain tonality, like they're able to scream in key or whatever. Like they have a certain, like I said, tonality or something that makes it have character. And there's a lot of these people out there that are just kind of like have like no character.
Right.
But I think the main thing that people should expect from this record is that it has a lot of heart. It's just, I think that you can tell that the people involved, there's no fakeness about it. Like they just did things that they really loved. You can tell like the energy of the music is is genuine. Is I guess the best adjective I could use for it. And I think that when people hear the record, they'll know that.
Yeah, well, I think if the first single is any indication of what the rest of the album is going to be, I would definitely agree with that statement. I feel like there's enough heaviness in the first song, Worthy, that, you don't even need screaming on it.
No, I think that the instrumentation takes care of the heaviness more than enough, and Corey's just, Glover's just great at what he does, and so why change it,
Right.
You don't take the perfect steak and then put it back on the grill. You just eat it.
Definitely.
So I think that once it's out, it'll make more sense when people can hear the whole album. When you hear like one song, a lot of people, we've got nothing but pretty much positive response, except from those like, the occasional black metal, death metal, angry dude that hates every other kind of music.
Mm.
There's a couple of those, but you got to expect that in general there's going to be some hate, like that's just the way of the world. And the internet, of course, because people love to hate.
Yeah, all those trolls out there.
Without consequences, so, but I think that's a big thing. I think people will just feel like how genuine the music is, and I think that translates. Like no one's trying to force anything that's not themselves. Like Core's not trying to force himself to, be some crazy screamer or growler guy, and nobody else. Like everything came together very naturally, I think.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, Corey, I really appreciate the time you took to chat with me.
Absolutely, no problem.
And look forward to everything that's coming up for you guys.
Well, hopefully I'll see you out there at some point.